Welcome back to Apolitical. I am your host, Alan Sroki.
And I'm your other host, Tyler Goldberg. And we seem to have a third person in the studio today.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you all so much for having me. I've been a fan of the Apolitical podcast for a while now, I guess since inception. Yeah. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it's great to have you. We're really excited about this one. This is something a little bit different than what we've done before. It may be the first of a few different shows that we do like this.
I should hope so.
Yeah. Robin is here today with LoopMe, one of our digital partners that we work with on, a variety of things over at Assembly, be it political, commercial, all around. And we today we're here to discuss some pretty interesting stuff. But first, Robin, just a little bit about you and what you guys do at LoopMe.
Yeah, thank you. So, Robin Porter, as you all mentioned earlier, I'm the head of political at LoopMe. And who is LoopMe? We are a global ad technology company. And just to make it very, very simple, we use our proprietary AI to improve brand performance or advertising performance and ultimately advertising outcomes. Yeah. And what makes us really different in this space, and a little bit of what we'll talk about today, is that we have the capability to collect and integrate human sentiment into that process.
I mean, and sentiment that's sort of where we go with a lot of this work.
It's kind of our bread and butter.
Our honey Dijonnaise, if you will.
Now I'm hungry.
We had a great sandwich just about an hour ago. It was wonderful. We've always talked about the effect of political ads on the commercial space. And it's not just that it's more expensive if you're an advertiser, it's more expensive to advertise in these markets. It's that it fundamentally alters consumers' frame of mind, and that changes how they act as consumers.
If you're advertising your brand sandwiched in between attack ads for a presidential campaign or Senate campaign, consumers' sentiments might change. They might be not even listening at that point, too. I mean, there's a variety of different ways that, I know how I react if I'm seeing too many ads, especially the same ad over and over and over again. And I think it's just a really interesting area that is not really been touched on by a lot of people in the space. And we all partnered to do something pretty interesting during the last election cycle.
Yeah. So, Robin, if you want to just tell the folks at home. By the way, folks at home, Robin, folks at home.
Hi, folks at home.
If you want to talk a little bit about sort of how we sort of came together and what we did here.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of a backdrop here because, as I mentioned, been big fans always of you, but have known that you all have expertise in the space of predicting and modeling what's going to happen in an election year, particularly in what markets, what is that intensity going to look like? And then you take it a step further, and I think this is very unique in that you don't just predict, because there's a lot of data out there, good data, that's predicting, but you work with the non-political advertisers, as you were saying earlier, to then do something with that data. How do we inform strategy so that not only are they showing up at the right times, but in between the right content, right?
Exactly.
So knowing that that's your expertise, and then at LoopMe, we have the ability to look at that data that's predictive, but in that moment, especially in this last year, in that moment, we can actually ask the viewers, how are you feeling? How is this impacting you? And then tie that back to what you all have been predicting. So it was just an obvious, perfect match, and so it was very exciting to get to work on this research project together.
And what I love about that is this was not a survey that was created in a laboratory kind of thing. You cannot fake the active political campaign.
We had to do it when we did it.
I mean, just look back at what we looked like during our October, November episodes. You can't fake that.
No.
That is real exhaustion.
Haircuts don't lie.
The haircuts, the bags, the pale skin, all of it.
And I think a lot of America, honestly, probably felt that way during the election cycle.
We were a real mirror for the rest of America.
They felt seen.
They felt seen. And what that allowed us to do was actually go in October of an election year and as you said, speak to these folks and let them understand how they were feeling about these political ads.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about, and, we don't want to give too much away because we are going to be,
just breadcrumbs.
Just some of the interesting stuff today. There's plenty of interesting stuff, too, to read in this actual report once it's released. A little bit on the process on how we got started. You presented us with the opportunity to conduct this survey. And Tyler, you and I, we wanted to figure out the right way to get the right swath of viewers to get a better understanding of different levels of intensity, how you are impacted by your commercial viewing habits are impacted by those various levels. So we chose 5 markets of varying levels of intensity.
Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Houston, Omaha, and Chicago.
Right.
And we chose those markets because each brings something different to the table. It's
Right.
not just geographic and demographic diversity.
It was different races.
It was diversity in the political campaigns
Right.
that were affecting those markets.
So Los Angeles had a very busy Senate race and a litany of busy House races. That was a pretty easy one to choose for
Yeah.
that category.
Omaha is sort of that interesting where it had presidential because
Right.
of the way Nebraska does it, as well as a competitive House race,
Yeah.
as well as a late-breaking competitive Senate race.
That one was very interesting.
which
yeah.
sort of came out of nowhere. So,
And then
I mean, Omaha seemed more like Atlanta of yesteryear
true.
kind of thing.
And then Chicago, which was a market that we really wanted to choose because obviously it's a massive media market, tons of viewers. But Chicago had no real local elections of any sort of significance during the 24 cycle. They really had the only types of advertising they would have seen would have been the presidential stuff, and that was only through
Nationally
national
targeted,
buys.
yeah.
No one was buying Chicago locally for that race, for any race. And so that was a really interesting market to throw in there to sort of like round it out.
One thing I loved from the get-go is that when we brought this idea and this project together and we started brainstorming, you all didn't want to just go after the predictable markets.
No.
Nobody needs to do research to know that in those top battleground markets, we're going to see certain type of viewership fatigue or intensity. But you were very strategic about the markets like Chicago and Omaha, like what you mentioned. So it brought about very interesting data.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the foundation of the work, as you were saying, the projection work that we've done is that it goes deeper than
Exactly.
just Detroit's going to see a lot of presidential spending, which it did.
Thank you
Well,
for your expertise.
Shocker.
You know, you're
That
welcome.
was a deep cut.
But it's also how these state and local elections that people are still seeing ads for. And I think the Chicago example was fascinating to me
Yeah,
because that's almost the baseline. Like if you were in
yeah.
Chicago, you were probably seeing as few political ads in 2024 as anybody.
Right.
So the fact that still a significant percentage of people in Chicago said they saw
Yeah.
too many political ads really tells you something about where we are as an industry.
Yeah, that was a really interesting takeaway for me when I was looking at some of the results from this survey. 70% of the respondents, nearly, of Chicago viewers said that they saw too many political ads on television. Now, granted, we know that there were, the national buys on television. Perhaps that's also conflating like YouTube TV or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think what's really interesting about that is, it's a function of the presidential year, right? Like that's why they're seeing those many ads. What would be really interesting to see, which I'd like to see if we could do this type of thing again.
Robin,
Yes.
you're welcome back 2 years from this moment.
Is if
I'm
we went back to a market like Chicago during 2026 midterms where you're not going to see national campaigns, I would wonder if a market of that size at that low level of political intensity would sort of report different numbers.
Yeah, I think, and it'll be interesting because in Chicago specifically, they'll have a governor's race in 26.
We'll have to find a different
but
one.
no,
Yeah.
but I think that's a really interesting thing because people, at least I would expect that if
Yeah.
you pay less attention to politics in general, you may not notice the local ads as
Right.
much as you would notice a Trump ad or a Harris ad or
Right.
however that works.
Right.
One thing I wanted to go a little bit deeper into was the so what of this, right? Like how this affects how people spend their money and treat other ads. And one of the biggest stats I saw was that the competitive markets, if you were in a competitive political market and you felt that you were seeing a ton of political ads, it made you way more likely to tune out all advertising,
Right.
which somewhat makes sense to me, right? Like if you are just sort of done with politics, you've seen so many negative ads, you may want to block out other ads, or all ads, I should say. And I think it was interesting to see that trend.
Yeah, the fatigue is not siloed.
Right.
Once you start to tune out, you tune out to all of it.
None of this is to say, as we always caveat, none of this is to say, as a commercial advertiser, you should not
No.
advertise in an election year. But it's to say that if you don't take into account this sort of data, these sorts of insights, and you're just doing the same thing you do in October as you did in April, that is going to make your campaign less effective, your commercial advertising campaign.
And less efficient.
And less efficient.
You can run any metrics that you want to try and optimize your strategy to throw as much what you believe to be the right amount of money in the right amount of markets. But if you're not considering political in a really holistic sense,
Yeah.
then you are leaving. I guess not leaving money on the table. You're kind of throwing money out the
Wasting.
window.
And I mean,
Yeah.
the stats we saw was half to 2/3 of Americans, depending on where they lived, felt oversaturated by political ads. half of that population said that the oversaturation of political ads made them less likely to pay attention to commercial ads.
Right.
That's a significant chunk of the sort of viewing public, if you will.
Yeah.
I think was super exciting too, that you all will be able to really use to strategically advise, is it wasn't just the fact that the fatigue goes to non-commercial ads, but it also is tuning out to those and also purchase intent as well, which we won't
Yes.
give too much away.
But that's really one of the interesting things that we covered here. Yeah.
And that's something we've talked about for a while is the effect, especially over the last couple election cycles where the economy and inflation have been, and I would certainly expect in the next election cycle too, where the economy and inflation have been such wedge issues for voters. If you're being targeted by hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars in ads, saying you are poorer because of inflation, of course it's going to make me less likely to spend money.
Right. But to go back to your point, Tyler, about should non-commercial or non-political advertisers just stop spending? No.
Right.
Not only do we have this data around the fatigue, but there's certain demographics that get a little more fatigued on certain platforms and are less likely, or some that are not impacted and are more likely. So those are the data nuggets that you're all going to be able to share to be able to strategically navigate versus just turn off the faucet.
Right. And I mean, presidential election year, we also had the Olympics. Huge
yeah.
tempo moment.
Yep.
Massive.
Ton of the Olympics coincided right around the candidate switch, right around the conventions, all of this stuff. It was a wild summer, unprecedented summer. So you had all of that. You know, it continued into the fall, and so yeah, it certainly makes sense that where people were watching, they saw a lot of political ads. It wasn't just I'm in Chicago, I'm watching my local news, because if that was the case, you may not see as many political ads.
So I guess some closing thoughts here, right? Like about, what do you think are the next steps, Robin, in like conducting research like this for, political agencies such as ours, but also for like, commercial agencies? Like what should some of the big takeaways be from this when they read this report?
I think one of them is, we are collectively so quick to move on to the next cycle or start preparing. But what I love about this project in particular is we took a pause. We collected data at the right time in the intensity. But then post-election, we paused and we worked with our data science team and you all and dug into the data to really help us inform the next cycle. So I think that needs to become table stakes, where we're taking the learnings and we're applying them.
My takeaway from this is that it's not that this is a problem, because as I said, if you can adequately respond to this, it's a challenge, but it's not a problem. However, it is a challenge that is increasing every single election cycle.
No doubt. No
We
doubt.
we haven't given our full 26 projections yet, but safe to say I think it's going to be one of, if not the most expensive midterm on record.
And it's not just relegated to TV. It's not just relegated to online video, OTT, that kind of stuff. It's it's a fragmented media landscape, and every single political cycle that we go through, the advertisers more and more and more go to all these different channels. And a lot of the results from this survey highlighted that I feel like that growing intensity across those different mediums. And there are certain mediums that are not seeing it quite the same level as others, but this is it's a phenomenon that exists pretty much everywhere, not just in the traditional sense that we've kind of come to expect.
Absolutely. Well, you'll have to tune in to the 2027 edition of this strategy, of this survey response. Well, Robin Porter, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to LoopMe for the amazing partnership on this and many other projects.
This was a really cool thing. I think it's going to have people asking a lot of questions and going to spur some really interesting conversations.
It's nice being told we were right about all of our thoughts for all of these months.
That worked out well, didn't it?
It worked out very well.
He's not one to pat himself on the back,
We would
folks.
not have had
do
this
it for
show
you.
if the data did not go with it. But until next time, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Tyler Goldberg.
And I'm Alan Strokey.
Robin, you want to take us out?
Okay, I'm honored. And I'm Robin Porter. Thank you for watching APolitical.